Bioretec released the Q3 business update today, and we have a pleasure having the CEO, Sarah van Heilenberg Hubar-Fisher, with us. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Before we go into Q3, I wanted to ask about H1. You had to revise the figures, so can you recap what was behind the revision and what did you change exactly?
Sure. So it's a pleasure. So very recently, together with the new interim CFO and our auditor, we noticed that there had been incorrect accounting practices related to our previous distributor agreements. So more specifically, previously reported net sales in H1 2025 didn't properly take into account a repurchase addendum, which was added to our tri-state distribution agreement in May, just before I was appointed interim CEO. In addition to that, there was a one-time credit invoice related to Spartan Medical's distribution agreement, which was incorrectly deducted from net sales in H1 2025. So as a result of all of these corrections and changes, our reported H1 2025 net sales actually stays about the same, but our expenses grew by roughly 1 million euro. And these changes are described in more detail in our correction release.
Okay, so going into Q3, how would you summarize that period for Bioretec?
Yeah, so Q3 was my first full quarter as CEO of Bioretec, and it was an enlightening one where I could really get under the hood of the company and dive deeply into our people, our processes, and our operations. And this resulted in a few corrections, which were noted in the releases from earlier this quarter. Also resulted in the onboarding of a new interim CFO, a new operations director, and the hiring of some additional senior commercial talent, both in the US and outside of the US. This investment in talent is really helping us define our commercial strategies in both of those geographies, where to play, how to play, and we've been reactivating some distributors from the past with new agreements in key markets, which will be reflected in Q4. So together, the total operational and commercial model was under review in the last quarter, and the preparation of the new strategy, which I mentioned in previous releases, will be shared before the end of the year.
As you mentioned, you're undergoing many changes, and the figures are maybe not that important now. But I just want to ask about the gross profit. So your gross profit was a little bit lower than in the last year, same period. So was that because of increased Chinese sales, or were there other reasons for this?
No, I mean, I think in some of our sales margin impact is related to product mix, in particular also when we reactivate or when we activate even a new distributor. There's an investment required in instruments, which are pretty low margin products, but those instruments are tools that enable the sales teams to go out and actually sell our implants. So they're required upfront investment. And as we're reviewing and making changes to our commercialization strategy, those activities happened in Q3 and will continue into Q4. And in addition, our spend has increased in the past quarter as part of a review of all of our people, processes, and operations. And so some of that spend reflects some one-time expenses that we don't expect to recur.
You didn't comment much on the progress of the launch in Europe of the RemeOs product family. So can you share anything on that?
Sure. So I'm sure everyone's aware on the back of the CE mark, the next step there is that you need to do country level approval process and registration processes. So even throughout Europe, we expect those country registrations and approvals to be continuing through the end of the year. So those are still underway and in progress. And once those are done, we update our sales contracts with existing or new distributors in any of those respective markets to reflect new sales quotas and contracts for RemeOs specifically. So all the activity is continuing and is underway and has continued through Q3. And the initial results and surgeon feedback has been extremely positive, and we'll continue to share updates on the utilization of RemeOs in those markets and the surgeon feedback through our PR channels.
So one of the big changes you are currently working on is the distribution model in the US. So can you talk a little bit about the background? So why are you changing the model and what are you doing exactly?
Yeah, so we may have discussed this a bit in H1, but it's worth I think repeating here, and so I appreciate the question. The stocking distributor model is not a US model as a kind of standard as an industry standard. US models are really direct distribution and sales agent models, and that's done with intent. And the intent of that is to be able to track and trace where your revenue is coming from at the specific hospital level and the case level. And it's also a high margin business in the United States. So by using a stocking distributor model, as a manufacturer, you're giving away a lot of that margin to somebody else. So we're committed to staying the course on building this direct sales channel, even though it's creating more pressure on our top line in the short term, while we're building this channel from the ground up. 2025 is really a year where we've invested in this, and that's reflected in the direct distributors that we signed in the first half of the year. And then you can see from our Q3 release and update, we have 7 new direct distributors also that we signed up in Q3 alone. So the process is to sign up those direct distributors and then really invest in training and education, which we've also underinvested in, I'd say, over the last year since we've had some feet on the ground in the United States since 2024. So training in it, they need to be properly trained and educated on the products, and then they need to be able to go out and sell those through hospital approval processes, which also can take anywhere from 3, 6, 9 months time. So we're full in the thick of that now, getting through our first hospital approval processes, really refining and honing in on training and education to make sure that messaging is correct and that our sales agents out in the field can represent the product and our company appropriately, and continuing to hire on new distributors so we have more feet on the ground to be able to promote the product. And so committing to this direct sales channel is something that we're going to stay the course on.
So I guess it would be feasible to expect some tangible results in next year, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Our expectation is to grow our direct sales channel quarter over quarter, without question.
One of the things in your report was that you have increased the headcount quite a bit, and you already commented a little bit on this, but can you talk a little bit more about what have you strengthened and what kind of changes have you made?
Yeah, as reflected, I think, as part of the statements we've made in Q3, our focus here is really on increasing our senior commercial talent in the US and outside of the US. That's reflected in our hiring of Blake Helm, which is our Area VP West in the United States, and Jordi Winters, who is our new VP of OUS Sales. Combined, those two people and talents, they bring over 40 years, or roughly 2 decades, of orthopedic experience and sales experience in these markets. And so it's a huge asset to our company to have them now also part of Bioretec's management team and talent. In addition, we have Renee Eve, who joined us as the new operations director. And so that has also afforded us the ability to really review our strategy on what we're building to. So our inventory levels were being built to stock. Now they're being built to buffer stock, which sounds like a slight nuance, but it makes a big difference. It's real establishing targets that also help us manage our net working capital more appropriately, but give us the flexibility to be able to handle perhaps, short-term acceleration in ordering. So these are things we're investing in heavily, is our commercialization, our operations, whilst we still maintain very large investments in R&D and our pipeline.
Yesterday you released a press release on change negotiations. So can you recap what's that about?
Yeah, the negotiations are underway as a result of normal, I'd say, disciplined business planning processes. We're committed to focusing the use of our proceeds on investments that are going to drive clear results for the business. And that's what these negotiations are tied to. We need to invest our money and our resources in the right places and where we need it most.
So you told after Q3 about a transitional pass-through payment. So what's that effect of that practically for Bioretec in the kind of short and midterm?
Yeah, so the traditional pass-through payment is it provides hospitals as well as ambulatory surgery centers with additional reimbursement for new and innovative technologies. And our RemeOs trauma screw is a breakthrough in innovative technology. So it qualified for this pass-through payment. Its purpose is to lower the economic barrier for adoption, and then to make our RemeOs trauma screw more accessible to a broader patient population. So that's the intent. And so naturally, we expect this to support our short and long-term commercialization progress in the United States, but it's obviously just one factor.
So you recently withdrew your financial targets and also you're evaluating your strategy. So can you talk a little bit about that? It's of course big news. So what kind of plans are you building currently?
Sure. So our financial targets have been in place, I think, since around the year 2021. And it was a priority agenda item when I stepped in as interim CEO and became permanent CEO at the end of August to review those financial targets and really understand what's our strategy going forward. So I spent a lot of time in Q3 working through that and looking at our financial targets. And together with the board, we began preparing an updated strategy and a commercialization plan. And in connection with that, on the draft reviews of those, we've had to conclude that the previous financial targets were not likely to be met and that they needed to be more in line with industry standards. So we'll provide an updated strategy and the revised financial targets by the end of this year, as previously communicated.
About your pipeline, according to the report, you started the clinical trial on hammer toe indication and pediatric indication. So can you give some estimates of what would be the timeline for the clinical trial and possibly submitting the FDA approval?
Yeah, so timelines for both those are tough, of course, because they depend, the clinical trial depends on patient enrollment and how fast that goes. And then, of course, FDA timelines, as we all know, are very difficult to predict. So we don't attempt to predict those. But what I can say is you're correct. The hammer toe clinical trial is ongoing, and the first patients there have already been enrolled, as stated. And with the pediatric risk clinical trial, we've received all the required approvals, and patient enrollment is commencing. So we're enthusiastic about, making progress on both of those fronts.
And in the US, you're looking to bring new screw models to the market and also expand indications. Do you have any comments on how that is progressing?
The main comment I can make is that the team is heavily invested in that. We understand that the cannulated screw is an important product for the US market commercially, and it's a priority product for us. And so our team, our CTO, has been dedicating a lot of time on that project. And, as we are a novel material, and we're working closely with the FDA on that process, what I can say is that both the FDA and ourselves are very much committed to the progress of that product.
Regarding funding, you had a share issue in Q2, and now your cash position was 7 million plus. Any comments on the cash runway?
Well, we previously communicated that the proceeds raised from the summer's rights issue would carry us into 2026, and that's true. Our top line has been progressing more gradually than I think was originally expected, and our R&D needs still remain fairly consistent and high investment for us. So in connection with our updated strategy, we'll also assess our future investment needs and will correspondingly communicate those financing needs and the updated strategy before the end of the year.
And I guess also when it comes to turning cash flow positive, you will also be giving an update later on this year.
Yeah, from our perspective, and again, if you compare to other medtech companies, I'd say medtech growth companies don't manage to profitability. That may be an unpopular statement, but it is fact. Medtech companies manage actually to growth. And so our objective here is to focus on top line, is to focus on our margins and to build a sustainable growth business rather than build a business that's managed to profitability at this stage of the company.
So you're currently making new plans, but is there anything you can comment on the outlook for the rest of the year and for 2026?
For the rest of the year, I mean, we released, I think, on the 27th of October, that we don't expect accelerated sales in 2025. And during Q4, we're really going to be focusing on finalizing our new strategy and our commercial planning, which we will release. And along with the new strategy, we'll provide some updated financial targets for the coming years. And so we're excited about what's ahead for Bioretec, and remain committed to deliver on that and providing investors and shareholders the confidence that we're building a business that they can count on.
Thank you very much for the interview and best of luck for the next year, Sarah.
Thank you so much.